After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the world was on the move. Some people invaded, some settled peacefully, but one thing was certain: fashion had to adapt. In the cold north, Germanic and Norse tribes wrapped themselves in thick wool to survive icy winters. Meanwhile, in the warm Mediterranean, linen and lighter wools kept people cool. If you were rich enough, you might even get your hands on silk. Clothing was simple but stylish. Loose tunics, belted at the waist with cloaks draped over for warmth. Men rocked trews, the ancestors of modern pants, while undergarments made of linen kept things comfortable. And let's not forget the bling. Buried treasures reveal embroidery, woven braids, and jewelry that showed off status. Before fashion could flourish, fabric had to be made, and trust me, it wasn't easy. Before the year 1000, weaving was a slow, backbreaking process done on vertical looms. Women spent hours spinning wool by hand, setting up warp threads, and carefully weaving each weft thread to create cloth. Because fabric was so precious, medieval tailors wasted nothing. Clothes were cut in straight lines using every bit of material, curves and fancy cuts. Way too risky, but clothing wasn't just fabric, it was wealth. Jewelry wasn't just for looks, it was money you could wear. Baltic amber, gold, and rare gemstones were traded across Europe, and Norse graves reveal stunning glass beads, metal brooches, and intricate belt buckles. As medieval society became more settled, fashion started to evolve. No more just wrapping yourself in wool, people wanted style. In Charlemagne's Holy Roman Empire and Anglo-Saxon England, monks and scribes carefully illustrated clothing details in their manuscripts. Words like kirtle, an undertunic, and mantle, a cloak, come straight from the Anglo-Saxons. By the 12th century, fashion wasn't just practical. It was flamboyant, dramatic, and even romantic. This was the age of chivalry, crusades, and courtly love, and clothing reflected the passion of the times. For the first time, outfits were designed to hug the body. Women's silk gowns laced up the sides, revealing intricate embroidered chemises underneath. Even ordinary tunics became more form-fitting, accentuating the waist, arms, and hips. Men weren't left out. Noblemen wore long flowing tunics like the bliot, with luxurious trailing sleeves and embroidered details. Accessories got bolder, pointed shoes, cascading cloaks, and elaborate belts became all the rage. And if you really wanted to show status, silk was king. Rare and incredibly expensive, silk fabrics like samite, cycloton, and lampas were prized treasures, appearing in medieval romance tales and exchanged as high-status gifts. In the 12th century, no one set trends like Eleanor of Aquitaine. She wasn't just a queen, she was a fashion icon, bringing luxury, elegance, and a bold new sense of style to medieval Europe. Her signature look? The bliot, a flowing, figure-hugging gown with long draping sleeves and intricate embroidery. In the Middle Ages, fashion wasn't for everyone. Your clothing reflected your place in society. While nobles draped themselves in silk and embroidery, ordinary people kept it simple and practical. Peasants, artisans, and laborers wore shorter, plainer tunics made of rough, homespun. Aprons doubled as tool belts, and for heavy work, stripping down to cool linen underclothes was common. Meanwhile, educated men, scholars, doctors, and lawyers wore long robes to mark their status. Even in the church, fashion mattered. Though priests stuck to older tunic styles, high-ranking clergy like bishops and cardinals were dressed in the finest silks and richly embroidered robes. As for color, it all depended on what you could afford. Everyday dyes from plants made earthy browns, yellows, and blues, but reds and purples. Those were rare, expensive, and reserved for the elite. The medieval Mediterranean wasn't just a crossroads for trade, it was a fashion powerhouse. The East and West constantly borrowed styles, and the result? A luxury boom like never before. Silks from China traveled the Silk Road, passing through Byzantium, Persia, and North Africa before reaching Europe. Islamic Spain and Venice became hotspots for exotic fabrics, bringing Eastern weaving techniques into Western fashion. Crusaders returning from the Middle East were shocked by the sheer amount of silk worn there. In Sicily, King Roger II's coronation mantle, a breathtaking silk cloak embroidered in gold and pearls, was a fusion of Norman, Islamic, and Byzantine artistry. By the 13th century, fashion wasn't just about clothing, it was a social statement. Outfits became bigger, bolder, and more dramatic, with voluminous tunics, tighter sleeves, and flowing surcoats. Accessories were just as important. Women styled their hair under elegant wimples or jeweled circlets, while men ditched beards for perfectly curled hair. Inspired by Romance poetry, ladies moved with graceful sways, subtly showing off their slim waists and luxurious fabrics. But as fashion trickled down, The wealthy weren't happy. Merchants and the middle class started dressing like nobles, blurring social lines. In response, rulers passed sumptuary laws, strict rules on who could wear what. By the 15th century, noble fashion was all about luxury and excess, with new weaving techniques, velvets, taffetas, and intricate patterns took over, turning clothing into a status symbol. The houppelande, a voluminous outer garment, draped in rich folds, its wide sleeves sometimes adorned with tiny bells. Women's silhouettes grew long and elegant, with high waists and forward-thrusting hips, a style meant to suggest grace and even fertility. But not everyone was impressed. The clergy condemned this trailing extravagance, warning that too much wealth in fashion was bad for the soul. But for the nobility, opulence was the ultimate power move. Medieval knights weren't just warriors, they were walking fortresses, adapting their armor to keep up with deadlier weapons. In the early Middle Ages, knights fought with axes, spears, and swords, protected only by chainmail shirts, metal rings woven together like fabric. But as crossbows emerged, firing bolts that could pierce mail, armor had to evolve. By the 13th century, knights began wearing hardened leather and metal plates for extra protection. By the 15th century, knights were fully encased in shining plate armor, and to stand out, they covered their armor in heraldry, bold colors and symbols that told their family's story and virtues. By the 15th century, fashion was bold, regional, and evolving fast, and for men that meant the birth of pants. The fitted coat got even shorter, worn alone or under extravagant houppelans with wide sleeves and flowing fabric. Clothing became more colorful thanks to improved dyes, but black was the hot trend, especially for the rising middle class, eager to show off their wealth. Wool quality improved and fur trimming hit its peak, while fashionistas went crazy for cut-raw edges as decoration. Meanwhile, individual hose legs were stitched together, creating the first full-bottom pants. Headgear got wild. Tall felt cones, draped hoods, wide-brimmed hats, and fur-trimmed bonnets were all the rage. Even sleeves became a statement, proving that by the 15th century, fashion was all about flair and individuality. By the late 1400s, fashion had become a spectacle of luxury, excess, and creativity. The wealthy flaunted their status with elaborate gowns, intricate details, and towering headpieces, despite sumptuary laws trying and failing to regulate it all. Women's houppelans and pleated gowns flowed in rich fabrics, belted over tight underdresses that were buttoned or laced down the front. Necklines were low and scooped, emphasizing high, structured bosoms, while outer garments featured dramatic high collars for contrast. Headwear became fantastical. English and French nobles wore wired horn headdresses and padded heart-shaped rolls, while Italians kept things more natural. Flemish women favored modest linen veils, proving that regional flair still shaped medieval style. Medieval fashion wasn't just clothing, it was status, power, and personality. From flowing gowns to towering headdresses, every stitch told a story. And while styles faded, one thing never changed. Fashion was always a statement.